Well, thanks for everyone to be here today. This has been professorial. What we're going to do, Mark and I have discussed this, is that there's a construct I know we talk about a lot, which is this stress approach to managing behaviours, but it drives a lot of the work we do. Because the way Lives Through Friends work, Mark and I bizarrely ended up with quite a few things that we've had to do together that are pretty messy, horrible, complex. They all involve people who are stressed, highly traumatised. So what we thought we'd do is, I'm genuinely going to try and stick to time for the first bit, because then we're going to have a discussion and Mark is then going to chip in with lots of examples of where we are. And we'll refer to that part of the talk as the good, the bad. Slower?
Yes, please.
Slower.
Remember that we're not English speakers.
Have you heard of Brexit? Yeah. You need to speak our language. and you're not welcome here. No, I'm only kidding. You're lucky they didn't machine gun you at the airport at the moment. Here at the moment, we've gone very right wing. Absolutely. And if you need to stop or you need to pause or talk to your colleagues, it's absolutely fine. But what I'm doing is I'll use the PowerPoints. You'll get all the PowerPoints plus a load of others. We actually have some in Spanish. I know that's not your first language though, is it?
I can do it.
You can bear to read Spanish, not Catalan?
I'm bilingual.
It's okay, we can do that. I've also decided, although I'll have to fight Gemma at the office, that the two main books that I base this on, you can have PDF copies, electronic copies. They'll go mad if I give you a free book copy. But we'll do that as well. So this is really context, making a connection, and we'll hopefully try and share some understanding here of what we're doing. The model that we've evolved is around stress and behaviour. Don't like the word behaviour much. And it's evolved over quite a few years. So we thought we'd get some of those basics right. So apologies, Julie, as well, and to Martin. Some of it is old wine into a new pot, some of it isn't. So I'm Andy McDonnell. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have an organisation called Studio 3 that somebody colloquially referred to recently as the clinical wing of Lives Through Friends. I thought it was kind of quite cool, actually. You know, we go into the dark places that nobody wants to go. MDTs, professionals who don't have a clue. So my association with Bob goes back a long way, and I won't do the cliche. He gave me my first job.
You've just done
it. You changed me. You gave me a lot of freedom in my first job. In my opinion now, with hindsight, too much. But there you go. Mark.
So I'm Mark, I'm a director at Lives Through Friends. My background's sort of provider, so I sort of owned and sort of sold a provider, and also done quite a bit of consultancy with turnaround for various sort of businesses in health and social. I got introduced to Bob beginning of 21, I think, wasn't it? I think now, and yeah, just because I'd done some work with some complex individuals anyway, so it was sort of starting to do that with Lives Through Friends, and it sort of aligned with what I was doing at the time. So yeah, and then at the moment I do the finance for Lives, but also work with quite a few individuals on various settings really, and trying to get them a life really, as opposed to just a service. So that's me.
I know we were introduced last night, but it was feeling very inappropriate, so let's start again today.
Sandy,
Hi, Sandy.
From Malta. I work with Agency Support, a national agency that provides services to persons with disability. My current service is the one for the day services.
Oh. And are you based in Valletta or all over the island?
All over.
Oh wow, cool.
We even have a centre and a residence in Malta.
I realised something about my organisation does this work, Alter. Okay, that's the Ukrainian pilots they're training at the moment. We're going to get in the finest planes money can buy. But it's this interesting thing you said last night, which is we have autism organisations, you have disability organisations, and they very rarely talk to each other. So I'm going to pick your brains a bit about that later, but you're very welcome.
Hi, this is Raul. I'm social educator and expert in dementia.
Oh wow.
We work with people with advanced dementia. My techniques are the validation. I don't know if you know this technique, this method.
Tom Kitwood.
Now in fail, and person-centered care from
Yeah.
Kitwood,
Yeah.
and reminiscence from Pam Schweitzer from London. And now I'm working in the administration with local government. So my due is to help the transition between the people who is living in adults resources and they got dementia, so they need to go to an old people's home, and how to talk to the families and the people to explain that this is not the world, the end of the world.
No.
That there's a new start.
It's tough work. We actually, the program I'm going to talk about has been adapted for people with dementia, but we don't do much of it in the UK, and there's a simple reason. There's no money for it. No one seems to care enough about people. As I keep telling people, we're going to be customers in the future. And we worked in the early days to do a project with an organisation that I can't name for legal reasons. Hopefully you'll edit this out, Bupa. And they basically said, we'll do this project nationally, but obviously you work for us now. So we parted company, but all the principles were the same, and a lot of the stuff that we based theoretically was on the great Tom Kitwood's work.
And I'm trained in DCN, the from Bradford University, and I think there's a challenge to apply this in the disabled, because it's always for old people and elders, and we are trying to fix some things to use it for.
That's fascinating, but it's very much that kind of work, you know. I would much rather talk about someone that passed. My own mother had dementia. I wasn't interested in what she had for breakfast or stupid reality orientation, but she could remember what she did as a child. So that's how we celebrated her life. And that's very simple. I learned that from Tom Kitwood, who was a great man and a real human being. So I'm really interested in sharing and find out about that. And ask more about Basque food later on. It's pretty cool.
We've all introduced ourselves, but I'm Julie, one of the Darks and Labs friends. But just interestingly, I need to speak to you about Tom Kitwood and dementia work, because I've got a lot of.
Yeah, they're fed up of listening to me, so.
Yeah. Let's talk to the next real person over here. Yeah?
Hi, I'm Kula.
Hi, Kula.
I'm the president of an organization, parental organization, which is called Pedagma. And we run houses of supported living in Athens.
Yeah.
I'm Isa from Barcelona, Catalonia. And here I'm working for support, but I'm an independent consultant.
Okay.
But I'm helping support many years ago already. And now we are focusing on a pilot project about personal budgets and their institutionalization.
Excellent.
We already got some funds for the first time from the government for them. But it's just a 30% about what we need for running this project. So now we are looking for private funds and so on, but it's something. It's the way they are saying to us, okay, we believe also in this model. This will be the first in Catalonia and I think in Spain on trying to do this in a methodological way. So as a consultant, I'm trying to plan all the different steps and to try to get all the information and all the good practices around in order to learn from the best. That's my duty. And then to explain into the organization. And
you got a very good punctuation.
We got a very good contribution on the evaluation for getting the funds.
Cool.
Yeah. So it means that it was well written and explained and so on. So we succeed on convincing the administration that it's worth it to try to do this kind of project in Spain. And I think my real challenge is something I learned in the last session is to try to train everybody in the organization, inside the organization, that it's possible to support. And because, we follow the New York Convention about the rights of the disability people and so on, but who really is practicing this, is applying the principles, and who really is taking every single situation as a good opportunity to make things different.
In Spanish, is authentic in English. What's the Spanish equivalent of saying you're authentic? Authentico.
Yeah, authentic.
That's the key.
That's the point, because my real concern is to convince people that every new intervention with a person is a new opportunity. Every single one is a new opportunity. So don't lose the waste your unique opportunities. So I'm here to.
Wonderful. And learning's a two-way street. We're not the kind of people who say we have all the answers. We have more questions ourselves than answers a lot
But
of
I
the time.
think you are in a different screen than we are. I mean,
Yeah.
you're already.
We're not representative of the UK. I just want to say that again.
I know, yeah.
We live on the edge. But that's cool. Thank you. Obviously, Martin.
Martin Stone. I'm a neighbourhood organiser in the daytime, but I'm involved in Lives Through Friends as a director. I brought time banking to the UK, and strength-based community development for the last 40 years. So, that's me.
I'm Ludmila. I came from Moldova. I am a regional director for Keystone Human Services US for Central and Eastern Europe, and I am executive director for Moldova. Keystone Moldova organization. We are focused on reform of social protection in Moldova, particularly related to persons with disabilities. Since 2008, practically, we did a lot of deinstitutionalization, development of new social care services, integrating those services in the public budget, inclusive education, researches in vulnerability fields. Now we have like around 20 projects under the development. Half of them are focused on refugees with disabilities from Ukraine. It was our initiative to develop task force on disability under the UNHCR task force, to unite all forces in Moldova to support refugees with disabilities not to be left behind. And it was a very good decision, because by now I think we are the one country that is focusing on refugees with disabilities and elderly with chronic diseases, because the major problem is access to medical services in our countries and access to assistive equipment and so on. And we are integrated in all this UNHCR group in order trying to mainstream disabilities everywhere, because usually when it's emergency, there are many people that needs emergency and persons with disabilities are left behind. And I'm leading this task force group for the second year, but we also provide the services for refugees with disabilities. We have 8 mobile teams that are working nationwide supporting them. And we support also based on person-centered planning approach. We have assessment of all of this jointly with them and supporting with and referring also to others. And we have complaint mechanism for persons with disabilities in Moldova developed with EU support. We are accredited for that and are delivering this service for persons with disabilities like a hotline, 24 hours, 7 days. And practically we extended this service also for persons with disabilities from Ukraine since the first day of the war. And myself, I was born in Ukraine. It's a Romanian village, but before the war it was part of Romania. But now it is part of Ukraine anyway. It is now also like my birth country, and I need to give back. Thank you.
Do you want to do this presentation?
You ought to mention where Joe is spending most of his time in your introduction. There might be a really good link there.
Yeah, my name is Hugh. I work for an organisation called Walk, based in Dublin, and learned from and supporting people with disabilities now for a couple of years.
You're much older than that.
That link with Ukraine, our CEO when the war broke out put a big emphasis exactly on that, on how we can support in our own way people and then families with people with disabilities, and organising convoys of vans and trucks going over delivering goods to the Polish Ukraine border. and making sure as best we can that they were going to be funneled in the right direction, bringing back some people as well who, as you say, would just be, like, there's been such a big need all around, but that was a focus, and very, very humbling actually.
It's interesting that he's an old friend of mine, his boss. He's louder than I am to give you a perspective. Trust me, he makes me look quiet. Very opinionated, and he told me a few months ago that I said, "Are you going to carry on this work when there'll inevitably be a ceasefire?" And he went, "Oh, yeah." So hopefully I'll get a lift to Ukraine from the lorry that's going over. That's the plan. Yeah. But I think the purpose of today is to really, you lived it. I've worked with this man for quite a long time, too long. You've seen an organisation evolve. Low arousal and these principles about stress, they're part of it. But they should be seen as complementing the true person-centred approach, because all the people we're going to talk about today are, and I'll use the word, are damaged by life and the system. So we can say we'll set an individualised service up, and that's fine. But the trauma that people have experienced, and multiple traumas, takes many years. And when I talk to people, we say, "Are we talking years?" You're talking weeks. That's why certain behavioural approaches, it's very exciting for parents and families. We were talking about this last night, because it appears to give you a quick solution.
Yeah, we talked yesterday, Andy, about, and Julie, and perhaps a lot of it, around the problems we have with the episodic approach of transactional service provision in this country.
So the bit about this today is hopefully practical. I'm going to go through an approach that I helped develop, but that's really the wrong word for it. It's an approach that I helped label. You know, empathy, compassion, and kindness. It breaks my heart that that's the cornerstone of this. Right? We're teaching people to be empathic to individuals. And I said to you last night, I do work in institutions, which I love. I love it when you get that intense heat on your back when you leave. 80% of the audience think, what a lovely man, and the other 20% think, I hope he has a car crash. How dare he tell me that I can't have consequences for people? How dare he? Now, our work evolved as a psychologist. I started off originally as a proper psychologist. I lasted 3 months. Briefcase, bits of paper that no one reads. I felt good. My outcome each week is I've written more plans. And these plans were mostly works of fiction. And I came to realise it really quickly. I used to have a beard then because I was so young. There's people used to say, "You sure you're a psychologist?" So I don't have to do that anymore. I look the part. Trained by the best in behavioural analytic techniques. I could read them out like a list from who's who. And I would say I did learn a lot. However, even from a very young age, and it's partly Bob and other people's contribution, I am argumentative because my focus is working with people, but I am an academic as well. I'm a bit of everything. So when people say things like, there's a lot of evidence for this, they will get from me, where? And I'm getting tired of people coming up with rhetoric and nonsense. You know, my record was a behaviour support plan I had to review for a court in this country, and it was 132 pages long. It was very easy to deconstruct it and say, very simple sentence, I consider myself to be a highly intelligent individual, obviously with lots of humility, and I would struggle to recall any of this. And just even in the quantity of information here, this just reads like a lawyer has written this to protect themselves. Because it has no bearing on what's happening. And when we interviewed the staff around something that's really horrendous that happened, they all admitted none of them were following it. But the outcome in the meeting was, we've got a plan. So part of my disillusionment was there were lots of good ideas in behavioural psychology, lots of bad ones. And I was very privileged to work with a woman called Anne Donlan, who's now retired, and a guy called Gary Lavinia. Anne was like a second mother to me. Gary, I argue with him every single breathing moment I saw him, even now. I saw him in Australia a few years ago. He invited me out for dinner. The man's really rich. I ended up paying. Not an issue normally, but you know, you're having barracuda. It's not cheap. But we were discussing the fact that he wrote a book in the 80s called Progress Without Punishment. It's a Bible. I had a problem with the book because I had all these wonderful ideas as psychologists to think about not using punishment, lots of strategies. Some of them were very behavioural. It was very good. And there was 5 pages on what he called reactive strategies. And that's what started my first work off. And I said to him at the time, All you've got in here is when somebody's aggressive, play dead. Don't restrain, there's nothing here. So my work originally was about, we need to make that 5 pages, 20 pages, not 300. We need to get people confident and feeling safe to be able to work. You asked me a question last night, I'm trying to answer some of those questions today. There were a lot of big questions. So this approach that emerged got a name. I'm not sure I named it, but people think it did, called the low arousal approach, which people thought originally was about being nicey-nicey to people. It's a bit more than that. And I'm a very simple person. I believe in simple solutions to things. If you can't feel safe with someone, you can be as person-centered as you like. It's not going to happen. If all the staff run for the hills, and we've had examples of that, and good examples as well, he's the most dangerous person I've ever worked with. Really? I have a hate of a number of words. One of them is called forensic. It's an English word, forensic. You get that label, it means you're not going anywhere. You're seeing somebody at the moment that we're working with, and they're already saying in the health service facility, what is it? He can't go anywhere. This is for life.
He can't live in the community, he'll be for life in the hospital.
But not realising that a lot of the things they're doing, mostly inadvertently, are making him worse. My family's from Ireland. I'm a plastic paddy. As I told his boss and friend, I'm more genetically Irish than he is. It really upsets him. When he got married recently, I got him a DNA test. He's not told me the results, but his wife did. He's around 70, 92%. I'm not supposed to know. But one of the things he did when he went to the Ukraine was he kept on sending me messages, taunting me. English there, English fuckers there. I'm taking people back to Ireland and you people won't even let them in. I was ashamed. Ashamed. But one of the things that we learned with this whole approach is sometimes simple ideas are really hard for people to understand. So it's going to sound simple, but actually it's not to do in practice. So this whole low arousal approach, it's not just now about saying, you know, just watch about certain basic micro skills. It's also about the philosophy of what you think. And so the biggest principle I'm going to talk about today is you have to see people as stressed and traumatized, and being complex is not a dirty word. Because I'm afraid us people, we have some simple needs, but we're quite complicated. As I was explaining to people last night, there's a lot of research in autism about being context-driven in your behaviour. It drives people crazy. It's just more pronounced in people with autism. We're all context-driven. Last night, the context, I felt safe because I've had a tough week to just maybe imbibe on the cider, and then I noticed that some of the cider I bought wasn't being drunk, so it's called mind sweeping in England. When you take a half leftover glass of cider and tip it into your glass. I know it's very non-COVID safe friendly. So that's what I did last night, Raoul. Well, if I am, I'm a functioning alcoholic. But no, I'm just a binge drinker. I had a health check with the doctor. He went, how many units do you have? I said, it's actually really low, if you ask me that question. But I had them all at one time. So the approach has evolved, and it's still evolving. And it's not ownership. I'm proud of the fact that there are other people, smart as me and smarter, who are championing this. But we don't broadcast it too much. And I think that's been our challenge. My organisation is very niche. I've always been terrified, even though we have more therapists, we do a lot of online work, it's been amazing. I'm always concerned that I don't burn my own staff out. And now I've been told, with Bob's help and by my colleagues, they have put me back in my box. I have been told well and truly, go out there and be you and don't micromanage us. So we're appointing a COO who'll be your counterpart. You'll be talking a lot. And Rob, I'm expecting you to be a sounding board for her. What's he said now? I'm not a control freak. Why are you doing this? Let's not micromanage. But the whole approach evolved out of passion. My other confession is, although I grew up in London, in quite a tough neighbourhood, I did a questionnaire for a workshop called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire. I recommend that everyone does it. It's a World Health Organization questionnaire, and check out your own score. Because my upbringing would look pretty good, but my ACEs score is really high. Quite high. Alarmingly high. So when I look at this, what it means is, yes, I've seen quite a lot of violence in my life, and that's nothing I'm proud of. In different contexts, in different situations. When I was young, I used to seek it out. and realised this is a very stupid thing to do, especially when I got my head kicked in by a martial arts jab slapping person thinking, this didn't really work out well. This is me feeling insecure. And I see a lot of people in this industry who are frightened and scared of people, but they won't admit it. And if they can't admit that, they can't do the other bits of the work. So without much further ado, I'm going to attempt now to follow the slides, which I struggle with. This is a quotation from William Shakespeare. Maybe. It's from Hamlet. You don't have to understand all of it, but the phrase says, "This above all, to thine own self be true." That means be honest with yourself. And our entire approach is based on our being reflective and honest. How many people here have ever made bad mistakes working with someone who's challenging? How many people have done some good? Your hand should go up for both. We screw up at times, but it's only important if we reflect and learn on that. As I said, as an exercise, the single largest cause of challenging behaviour is in this room now. It's you lot. Us. But we don't get the plans. We don't have the honesty to say, this staff team don't get someone, they lack empathy, some of them. No, we write them a bit of paper instead. And it has to stop. So what's left of my career and my new freedoms that I'm having over the next few years, I'm going to get louder and louder and louder until Life Through Friends kick me out. Don't think it'll happen, but I'm going to have a good go. I'm one of your main marketing tools. I'm going to go to every conference that I've avoided over the last few years. I went to one a few years ago and somebody went, "Oh," I said, "Yes, I'm alive." "Are you presenting?" "No, I'm here to listen and learn from you positive behaviour support people." And the guy who presented came up to me afterwards and went, "What did you think?" I went, "I think you know, because nothing in there is real, but it's intellectually beautiful." So this idea about reflection is the cornerstone. Also, there's a lot of research that people don't understand. Has anyone heard of Daniel Kahneman? Don't film that. Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist and he won the Nobel Prize. All right? Really smart people in this room will know there isn't a Nobel Prize for psychology. Correct. He won it for economics. And he has been researching and been a leader for years about looking about how we make judgments under uncertainty. When you hear words like bias, most of that original research comes from his work. He's a sweet old man. You should look at him on YouTube. And what his research says, backed up with lots of neuroscience now that's growing, is we've got a lot of this wrong. We are such flawed, biased individuals that we'd be lucky to make judgments in situations. And the more stressed we are, the more rubbish they become. Really bad. And that's not just about biases about race. Biases about this guy's forensic. That word already drives everyone in the meeting to say, lock him up forever. But he's written a really brilliant book, I haven't got the visual here, called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, that talks about these biases. Can I give you an example of one? It's boring. Here's an exercise, slowly. All I'm going to tell you is, John, has a degree in psychology and he's 32. That's all you get. He's either a building site worker or a librarian. That's all I'm telling you. Who thinks he's more likely to be a librarian?
Can you repeat?
John is 32 years of age. He has a good degree. That's it. Is he a librarian based on that information, or is he more likely to be a building site worker?
You can't make that judgment.
Oh, you can. Statistically, you can straight away.
System 1 and system 2.
And this is what Carmen... There's a correct answer. He's more likely to be a building site worker. Because we have loads of people who work on building sites, and our bias and prejudice is someone with a degree couldn't be a building site worker. There's actually statistically like a ratio of 1 to 100 of librarians in the world. So statistically, he's less likely to be a librarian. And the reason why I'm saying it to you is that's called the representative heuristic. We're not even aware we're doing it. This is subconscious. We've already evaluated him. Your answer is the hedge your bet one, Julia. That's fair. Well, I haven't got enough information to answer. It's a good answer. Sit on that fence as much as you like. But, yeah, you don't want to make a judgment. You don't want to offend someone. But actually, the reality is there are hundreds of these biases that we're discovering that we have. And one of the biases is around risk.
Very straightforwardly, because us as social workers are trained
I know to
not to run to judgment.
Yeah.
I know.
So we're dragged out of the bias game.
Sorry.
And it makes us easily believe Carmen. It makes it easily for me to believe David Fleming.
But you two are not normal.
None of
No,
this
we're
stuff.
not.
No, David Fleming would say there is no academic discipline that is scientific,
So,
because of every discipline actually disregards the stuff that challenges it.
so here's the
So
big.
you say you can't do economics because, if you really were an economist, you recognise that the world has finite resources.
So,
But the world of economics doesn't. Sorry.
no, but it's okay. But Kahneman's doctorate and his work, and he's brilliant, was actually proving to economists, and this is really profound, that we don't think rationally or logically. Wow. And there's so much evidence for this, and you get people doing geeky, nerdy studies in laboratories. They all confirm a bias here that actually, the more stressed we are as well, the more uncertain a decision is. Can you guarantee that this person living in this house costing us £100,000, £200,000 is going to work? Do you know what I always say? He knows this. Yep.
Always.
I like to remove uncertainty. What's the honest answer? Statistically, there's probably a good chance this could work out. Commissioners don't need to hear that, Julie, because it clutters their brain up with what we call bullshit. I don't know how you say it in Spanish, but it's wrong. So,
And just to put that in context of where we're at as well, the Lives Through Friends approach to that is, don't worry about it. It's our job to make that work.
yeah. I'm just worried, Julie, because when we go down to Wales this week, you may hear me say that. I absolutely guarantee this will work. Then you go home, you open a bottle of whiskey and say, is this the one that gets me in prison? And the newspapers. It's the fear game, as we call it. That's what we do. But this idea about chaos applies to the people we support. There is growing research now, and I don't have time to go through it today, that although our brains are no different in weight and size, there are functional differences between certain conditions, autism, trauma, for lots of reasons. And actually, we've got all the neurology wrong. And I mean fundamentally wrong. And psychologists cause this. The brain is like a computer. It is not. In fact, it's a complete useless blunder to think it's a computer. 100 years ago, we had a paper written by a guy called Sherrington who said the brain is like a telephone exchange, because they had telephones at the time. We take an idea and we turn nonsense out. And the reason why we know this is that about 80% of our decision making, and I'm going to use a word that I never use when I train, is unconscious. Kahneman calls it type 2 processing. You're not even aware you're doing it. But the work I'm going to talk about today, when people are panicked and scared and they say, I'm not scared of this person, I'm okay with them, that's called type 1 processing. Type 2 is deeper, and the neurology is backing it up. So instead of input comes in from the world and I process it, it's nonsense. Our brains are hardwired. Most of the active processing comes from our brains first. So if my brain doesn't like uncertainty, which I don't use the word autistic brain because that's disparaging to them, then I'm hardwired for uncertainty. That's why I want to know what's now and what's happening next. I don't want to know what's happening 10 years down the line. It's actually trying to explain these things to people rather than just saying these are behaviours that are bizarre that people have. One of the first guys I worked with used to do this all the time. As a care worker, do you know what I used to do? I used to stop him because I was talked to. Don't do that. That's not normative, sitting there rocking like that. Stop doing that. It used to make him worse. He bit me once, and I had no understanding at the time that I triggered that incident. Stop doing that, stop doing that, and then he went, yeah. Basically, he was saying, if you put your hand near me again, I'm going to bite you. And then I started to realise, we're making people worse a lot of the time by this. Where does this come from? It all comes from normalised approaches to say, you have got to be like the middle class people in this world. You can't be different. Now, it's changed. The neurodiverse community, which is growing in power, I say to professionals, you've lost. You better listen to them because you've lost. You lost about 15 years ago. And you're not even going to get an article published in a journal unless it's been reviewed by somebody with a neurodiverse condition. That's where we're going. And it's a good thing. I'm very lucky because I have a lot of people, academics and others in that community, who are very supportive. One of them said to me, well, you're not autistic and you're not this. I went, He said, but you're definitely different. He said, I think you've got a syndrome called McDonnell syndrome. There's only one of you on this planet. Thank God. But the session we have all the time is give you a label and then the money follows the label.
Yeah.
And most of the labels, you do realise that the DSM, the latest one was DSM-5, where the psychiatrists and psychologists, mostly psychiatrists, will say this is your categories. There are over 100 different categories in the current DSM. How many believe they all exist? Because even the people who wrote the DSM don't think they all exist. I do an exercise usually for pretentious psychiatrists and psychologists. I get the DSM out, pen, 3 colours, red, probably exists, green, probably doesn't, not sure, amber. You do that even with professionals who believe in the DSM, they produce a lot of ambers. So why are they doing this? Because we like to categorise people because we like certainty. Oh, now you're autistic, now you've got trauma, now you've got this. We know how to work with that. We're hardwired to think this way, and it's wrong. But somebody mentioned last night, do you know David Petoniak? Oh yeah, one of the most amazing people you could ever meet. David is a thinker. His website, www.dimagine.com, I'll send it to you, right, is amazing. He has got an academic background and a practitioner, but he never writes in peer-reviewed journals from the outset. So he writes these wonderful articles. They're called things like Jumping into the Chaos of Things, which he wrote after we had a bit of a session in Dublin. He had about 2 halves and I had the rest. Your boss was there at the time, actually. And he also wrote an article, which I've always adored before I met him, called The Black Belt in Intellect. It's amazing. It's a very humorous but deliberately funny article about professionals who think they're gods and they know everything. So he follows this person, who could be him, could be any of us, saying, why are these staff not listening to me? Do they not know that I'm a black belt in intellect? Why aren't they following my plan? Because I'm some kind of genius. And that lies some of our fundamental flaw in how we run systems. People do need specialist supports, but they don't need the traditional supports that they get. Somebody who's stressed and anxious doesn't need to spend 2 hours travelling across Barcelona to get to a clinic with somebody who'll see them and then kick them out the door after 15 minutes. Therapists need to come to the person. They have a role, not the other way round. So we know it's all about chaotic thinking. Another thing before I mention about low arousal properly is this concept called emotional contagion. If you don't remember anything else, please remember this. All emotions are contagious. Positive emotions are just as contagious as negative ones. Right? Happiness is not just some idealistic dream. If most of us don't have moments of happiness, we cannot function. That's what the research says. I had a moment of happiness last night. It was transitory, it was alcohol assisted. So, okay, I'm with friends. I'll engage with you people. They think I'm a professor. I will prove them wrong. Somebody actually said to me once, it was actually in Canada. He said, you look more like a homeless person than a professor. And I said, thank you very much. I've achieved my aim in life. Would you like to see my certificates? I've got lots of them. I published lots of articles. Different person. But I accept and embrace the fact that emotional contagion is what I deal with all the time. Frightened, scared people who mostly don't want to admit they're scared. We see it all the time. Yeah. The staff team, Martha's, that they all ran off. Yeah. We trained them really well and they still ran off because they all sat in a huddle and supported each other with no leadership. Yeah. And they got paid well, but then they all decided this woman was too dangerous.
Well, it was running around in circles, wasn't it?
Anyway, it's stabilised, it's gone now, but it's a fresh start. And the learning was there was no leadership in that organisation. Their idea was we'll pay a lot of people a lot of money and they'll all be senior practitioners. Doesn't work. Somebody has to be the person who steadies the ship. It cost us a lot of money. The lesson there is make sure that they have regular support, that we have a shared understanding of why someone behaves in the way they do. Because MDTs, I don't know how you'd say it in yours, the 3 words I hate the most in my life. A multi, that's true. Disciplinary, not true. Team, definitely not true. It's a bunch of professionals who usually don't know the person, who sit on their towers and give what we call well-intentioned advice. In Irish, there's a phrase I use. Actually, you can do it as an exercise. It might translate, I don't know if it translates in language. Out loud, just say the following. Just say, I am a well-intentioned idiot. Or idiot, as we say in the old country. We do this all the time. And part of our job is trying to navigate around that. you know. I'm being increasingly used, Julie, and I like it, but I seem to be wheeled out as the grumpy old expert in Studio 3, and I do like that, except when there were 30 odd people on that Teams call the other week, and I just thought, I'm going to lose it here if I listen to another person pontificating about what they don't know about. But it's a medical model of support. It's how it works. So emotional contagion can also be positive. When we come in and do our work, we have to be positive people. I discovered years ago that I actually am a positive psychologist. I was born like this. And forget the traumas. There's part of me that thinks we can work with anyone. His boss said years ago, you'd convince us to open a service for a serial killer. And I went, that's harsh. He said, you brainwash people sometimes, Andy. I went, but that's what you pay me for, isn't it? And he went, yeah, I do, but I'm just saying, what's the limit, he said. I just want to know how much risk can we hold in this organisation? And I said, well, actually, most of the time, we're not seeing people as people, we're seeing them as objects and behaviour. And once you get that word behaviour or behavioural issue, we go down that dark place that people go to. So when we're looking at emotional contagion, we look at the positive sides of it.
And we're looking, just to relate back to where we were yesterday, we're looking at, when we talked about we don't recruit providers, we recruit leaders. This is what Andy's talking about.
Every
At the
time.
end of the day, if you don't have the leadership to support people that do these hard things, then we've lost before you start.
You'll get it. Yeah. Okay, so basically, when I say the model sounds simple, it's actually not, because it's about our own behaviour and our own reflection on our own behaviour, and that's hard for people to do. It's almost painful for people to do at times. You know, if we applied it to our own relationships, God help us. 38 years of arguing, and we're still together. We have a philosophy, my wife and I got from Gestalt therapy. Better out than in. Don't let anything fester. Yeah? I think my children are more emotionally literate than their parents, by a country mile. But if you understand this as a driver, we then go on to all the research that we know, and there's lots of it. I'm going to give you one example that's research-based. How many of you have heard of the hormone cortisol? Right. How many of you heard that it's a stress hormone? Yeah. It's only partly true. Do you know how many hormones we have in our body? Over 50. Only half of them have a label, and we don't really know what to do. Remember I said about computer early on? The brain sends signals to our body. All the drugs that we pump into people are based on this action here. That's why you can have somebody who's autistic with enough Risperdal to stop an elephant, and the person's wandering around laughing at you. There are so many mechanisms we don't understand, and increasingly psychiatrists are starting to understand that it's voodoo, it's witchcraft. So these hormones interact. So one of them, cortisol, it's true. High levels of cortisol is a neurotoxin. It makes you hypervigilant, irritable, affects your memory. And cortisol is secreted as part of your alert mechanism. And the way to think about it is, everyone goes about, I know about adrenaline, adrenal glands. It's basically, adrenaline is the quick shock effect. Cortisol is the thing that keeps you alert rather than awake. Cortisol kicks in your body, and within 15 minutes it's all through your body. You can't stop that. Unfortunately then, if you keep secreting cortisol because you're panicking and in chaos, you are biologically hardwired to be overly alert. We might say you've got ADHD, we might say you've got autism, and it doesn't dissipate that quickly. The problem is, cortisol is supposed to rise in the day because it keeps us alert. And sometimes if your cortisol level's low, you need stimulants to top you up. But at night it should drop. And when that drops, a hormone called melatonin increases. Melatonin does not help you sleep. It only helps you get off to sleep. There's a big myth around this around the world. Oh, we put him on melatonin and he's still getting up in the night. That's not what it does. When you're drowsy, it only works for a third of people. If they take melatonin, short term, never long term, it can help them get off to sleep. But it doesn't sustain sleep. So why I'm saying this is, a lot of the people that we're stressed with have sleep problems. And then it becomes a part of their life. And if this mechanism is switched, and studies show that where cortisol is supposed to be low in the morning for people who are hypervigilant, it's high. And at night when it's supposed to drop, it doesn't for a lot of people. So you're biologically hardwired to be awake at night. There are also many people with autism that I work with who have told me very clearly that they actually want to be awake at night because it's the quietest time of the day. They don't have to listen to birds tweeting. It's usually when they can get stuff done. If they live in a group home, it's the best time to get up and have a sandwich and then be yourself. So a colleague of mine at London University, I'll send you her paper, actually interviewed a lot of people on the spectrum. Georgia Pavlopoulou, yes, she's Greek. And she refers to it now as autistic sleep, that by the time we get to adulthood, about a third of us are nocturnal. You've got to, I'm using it as an example. Most of the research on sleep is nonsense. I read a lot of this stuff. I'm a sad person. It's nonsense. Oh, right, well, you need a sleep program to get back to sleep because once you're not tired, life will be good. If that mechanism is switched in, there's only one thing that reduces cortisol. Can you guess what it is? One thing, proven scientifically, and it's slow to stabilise cortisol. It's called a burst cardiac exercise. You can do your mindfulness, you can do your sit on the tree and it helps, but the thing that will always get people to become more resilient and less reactive is exercise. People with sensory reactivity, if you get them to exercise more, even at night, over time it will gradually help them adjust. It won't get rid of the reactivity. So this is science. So why don't we include exercise in what we're doing? Because we don't like it and it's hard. And if I said to you, we had an example in your service, if you increase this exercise while we do these fancy things, in 6 months' time, on average, you'll be sleeping a lot better. And one of your colleagues went, but we want a solution tomorrow. So, sorry, I'm pretty good at what I do, but I don't have a miracle for you.
Story. Amy. My daughter is on the spectrum.
Is she? I didn't know.
Yeah. And she knows Andy. And what are the special arrangements her employers make for her? She plans in cardiovascular exercise. Yeah. She has to do this class at this time. She has to get on her bike at that time. She has to do those, and by that she manages her life. And she, we're talking about she's gone to a new employer. Within 3 months, she was their national employee of the month. Because as a person with a disability or with autism, she's working with people with autism and she's asking them how they would like to spend their day. And the consequence, people are doing stuff they've never done before. Bizarre, isn't it? But
Amy challenges me because obviously I don't have to see her anymore because that's the other thing. You can help people on the journey. They don't need to become dependent on you. But she's lovely. And I remember that in the early days, she didn't like the A word, is what she called it. And actually I said, this is just a difference. It's not a big deal. And nobody needs to know. That was the relief with her. I said, nobody needs to know. A colleague had said to her, you've got a personality disorder. It's a difficult one, this, but let's just say I moved them on from our organisation. I had my doubts and said, you're a psychologist. You're not even qualified to diagnose that. And I said, name me 10 positive traits of having a borderline personality. Not even a personality disorder. You're borderline. And she said, well, I said, because there aren't any. And actually, in this case, you're wrong. So there was some damage inadvertently done by that as well, which we fixed. And it's people all the time think they're crazy. They're sensorily reactive. Their brains are no different from ours. Sensory issues get better over years. So we already know from our longitudinal studies on people with autism, if you take people in their 50s and 60s, they report massively fewer sensory issues because their body has literally adjusted to all this reactivity. But sensory issues are a big problem for people. So this mechanism is just one mechanism which I barely understand, and I think I'm fairly smart. You think I'm fairly smart, don't you, Ralph? I can tell. I can tell. No, you think I'm crazy, but might be that too. So that's one mechanism. So if we look at one of the first things we can do as clinicians, we have to get people to start exercising. But at night, with people with sensory issues, they don't want to exercise in the day. And this phenomenon of autistic sleep means we need to respect difference. For some people, about a third, they're biologically hardwired to be nocturnal. There's all these useless studies saying, well, none of us are hardwired to be nocturnal. Absolutely not true. But some of those people, as children, as their brains are developing, they're actually nocturnal people then, but we forced them into our neurotypical view of the world. You have to be up at 9 for school. You have to do your boring homework, and you must be in bed by 9. And then I'll get, my son's on YouTube all the time. I need to take YouTube away from him because that's what's keeping him awake. No, he can't sleep biologically, and that YouTube thing is stopping him from ripping your heads off. Actually happened with a family years ago in Dublin. And I thought we'd fixed everything from that point of view. And then I got a phone call saying, you need to come and see the family again. Why? Because the family itself had a big view on the advice. None of whom actually lived with him. And they said it's not normal to encourage him to be awake at night. All I said to them was, he's on YouTube and he plays PlayStation games at night because it distracts him. He also then can gather his thoughts, multitasking at the same time. And you've just taken his life jacket away from him. And I quoted Petoniak, when you're drowning, it's not the best time to learn how to swim. It's a really awful time. And in the end, the lovely family, I just said, can I meet your family? When I'm over in Dublin every few weeks. So I met them, sat in a room, said, you can all say your piece. They did. South Dubliners. And I said, that's great. And this grandfather went, we're not going to do this softly shite, he said. I said, that's okay. So you'd rather he ends up in a psychiatric hospital? Because I've never heard people so fucking wrong in my entire life. And I went, shut up, I've let you have 20 minutes, now I'll have my say. And they agreed not to interfere. Like he would text his mum when he wanted his meals. He's only at home. He was overwhelmed by things. Oh, well, what would you like tonight, was what I said to her. Would you like this, would you like, that's the menu. Because that's where he was. And that's the issue. We've got to get people who are hyper-vigilant, hyper-aroused to a good place where they can make these decisions. So hence, background, low arousal. Won't go through that one. You have all the slides. We met, everyone in this room is probably a low arousal practitioner. Are you empathic? Do you see the stressed, traumatized people? Can you try and walk a mile in their shoes? There's a colleague of mine who's a wonderful man with a lived experience called Dr. Damien Milton. Academically, he's the biggest thing in autism over the last 20 years. And if you haven't heard of him, that's because you're not listening to the right neurodiverse community. And he wrote an article years ago called Double Empathy, because there was a lot of rubbish about people with autism struggle with empathy. It's nonsense. They struggle with it, they don't not have empathy, and other conditions too. But he wrote a paper saying the problem is double empathy. It's not their empathy towards us, it's the fact that we're not very empathic towards people who are highly stressed and traumatised. And I've written a few articles with him. He's the most amazing person you could ever meet. Still quite shy, but double empathy's caught on in the neurodiverse community. My stuff sort of has. So that's why I'm going to write another article with him. I don't mind being a co-author. I don't mean number 5. He's just so sensible with what he talks about. When you're looking at dementia, you're reframing. That's double empathy. This is not a person who's dead.
We're usually working on this. First, we need to center ourselves before trying to communicate. And then we use not just this, but trying to read the emotion and answer with that emotion, the same emotion, even the same movement.
Yeah.
So they can see that you are seeing them.
It's really fascinating that the work you do, which is really important, is not valued around the world. Right?
Well, we can deal with this.
Hopefully you can. But what I was going to say to you is, I used to love working and doing training for people with dementia, even though my experience was limited. Do you know why? Because I always start with the same phrase. We're going to be customers soon. So you think about how you would like to be treated when the world becomes even more chaotic. And the basics, touch, comfort, all the Kitwood stuff, becomes even more important. But the big one is, in my approach, to half answer your question last night, I don't like certain behavioural approaches, not all, to try and fix people. They're like repair kit people. You're broken, here's my tools. I've fixed you now. This is North American nonsense. And it has permeated our societies for too long. It needs to stop. Right? I might help you a little bit, I might understand you a bit more, but I'm not there to fix you.
Who am I to
fix and who am I to judge? And you're not a broken version of me. That's the key message. So what we know is there are some simple principles to this crisis management training that are very obvious, but are very hard. The key one here is number 2. I would tell you that most of our training in crisis management, which is going all over the world and it's great, actually, when we get people in a room, says, when in doubt, shut your mouth. If you're not sure, give the person space and walk out the door. We struggle as a species to do that. Emotional contagion. Oh my God, somebody threw a cake at me. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a response which is fear. I looked at all the research done on behaviour over the years ago and said, I haven't seen a paper on staff fear in any of them. Nobody mentions it. I've been scared. How many people have been? I've been scared in a situation. Quite a few times. Anyone here been threatened with a knife? More than once? Several times? Because the other thing I don't admit to people is I got into this work as well by accident, because I'm also secretly retired a martial arts demigod. What rank are you? Demigod. 35 years of doing jiu-jitsu. It's not something I tell people about.
Often.
All the time.
You lot are different. You're club members.
He's never mentioned it before,
Hang
has
on,
he?
hang on, Julie. Allow me to go through my routine, will you? No, but it's actually something I don't want people to say, oh, that's what this is about. It's not. But it qualifies to me to tell people what's dangerous. And quite a lot of stuff that's taught in crisis management around the world is dangerous. There is no evidence base. I'll send you a recent literature review that says, written by me, my colleagues, there is no evidence base for this, but people are paying lots of money. And it's assumed, tick the box. You were saying it. Tick the box, they've had whatever brand of training it is, tick box. But this training does harm if it's not done right. It creates the idea that you're dealing with a monster and you're going to do this bad kung fu, which is what I call it. I used to go around on training courses when I was young, like a mystery shopper. Hard for me, wouldn't say anything. They usually then get these mats out on the floor and I was thinking, what's this got to do with care? What's this got to do with the vulnerable? And people love the training. Do you know why? Because a lot of them are frightened and scared. You can convince people it's black and white in crisis management training. I did it years ago as an experiment in the west of Ireland after a pub debate, ethics, with my colleague in the early days. And he said, could you convince people that fairly brutal techniques are okay? So we said stupidly, we'll do it tomorrow morning. We won't teach them what we normally teach them. My colleague and I, who was a martial arts instructor, a lovely man, has no experience in our field. He did the standard shtick. You can do this to someone. This doesn't hurt. This doesn't hurt. And they were going, really? No, it doesn't. Okay. About 90% of them were compliant. There was only one man and one woman who went, I'm not comfortable with this. And then we had to stop the experiment. They were very angry with us to say, we've just experimented on you like lab rats because this is all the stuff we say don't do. They were quite furious. It cost me a fortune that night. I had to take them all out to a place called Kilshimock in Mayo and buy them drink. Because one of them said, you didn't consent to this, but said, we want to prove the point. These are like snake oil salesmen. But avoiding arguments is number one. The number of times that somebody says, who's on later? I want this. And the answer is no.
And you said at the beginning that we were all low arousal practitioners. Yeah. I remember before Studio 3 existed and I was commissioning services. And we used to demonstrate that we were keeping staff safe. I used to interview people that said they were providing training. The only thing I wanted to know was, essentially, any sensible martial artist will teach people how not to get hurt and to get involved.
Damn right.
And that's all you need to know.
We're more scared than the rest of you lot.
That's all I need my staff to know. The rest of it is about how they reintroduce themselves.
I know I'm full of stories. I was working in the west of Ireland years ago in an institution, so we're going to work. It's pretty tough work. Half the staff did not want to know. And there was a young guy called Seamus. He's blind in one eye, non-verbal, got on really well with him. I'd sit with him. So I went to see Seamus, but I forgot he's blind in his left eye. So I went up to him and I touched him very gently, crouched down and went, how you doing, Seamus? And he went, bang! Knocked me right across the floor. My glasses went one way. Got up and one of the staff members went, the Studio 3 man's down. I got up, went, I'm really sorry about that, Seamus. Went round the other side, I forgot about you. And he went, okay, really sorry about that. Nothing to see here. And then one of the staff who we trained, who was really good, he came out with a form and went, you might need to fill this out. And I went, you can stick that, because nothing happened. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I have no recollection of what happened. I was clearly knocked unconscious, so I'm not filling that form out. And he went, oh, I get you. And I said, it'd be a good idea if you don't fill some of these forms out either, because it just reinforces that someone's a monster. It was my fault. I very rarely see on forms, it's my fault. That's behaviour. Non-verbal, very powerful. This is in my book. Yes, this is me. Beautiful man. I actually had a wound here, and it's become more pronounced on this black and white photograph. I look like somebody who should be in a jail. But you know that's just... So, I've used this a lot over the years. This look here has kept me safe on many occasions. Not in work.
No, this and movement like this is the other must go.
It's huge.
Wow.
And these are skills that people, they don't concentrate enough on. Now let's change the look. Does anyone want to help Andy now? Does he look sad? No, I'm just looking down. But we put all the emotional stuff on it. What we've also found out from recent research is we don't actually judge emotions by facial states at all. We judge it by our entire bodies and context. So all this stuff that's been done for years is actually pretty much rubbish. If you want to show someone, particularly on the spectrum, information, don't give them silly line drawings and pictograms. Show them a video of where they're going. Can't do that? Yes, you can. That's a social story as well. So it's stuff like that. So we know the values we share. We also know that this approach really is about attempts to order our behaviour. It's got nothing to do with the service users. It's creating an environment where people feel safe, secure, and in control. In my book, I talk a lot about the battle for control. You look at some of these plans people have, and it looks like a menu for just controlling people. Now, it doesn't mean say I'm a hippie, but we know all of these points of control lead to confrontation. So when we're doing this work, sometimes what we're trying to do is change cultures, not just one person or one. You can help that thing you start one step at a time, but then you need to change organisational cultures around this. And that means you have to get to managers and senior decision makers and say, your staff are going to have this type of training. You need to calm down and actually acknowledge it and don't question it. We had this in your organisation. Well, what I think is, after a while I went, you need to stop the Chinese Parliament now because I'm going to lose it with you lot. Well, we think. And it's still there now, and you've got a lot of new staff now that we've got to retrain.
Some people just like
that. And 20% of people just don't accept this stuff and never will. And they go into our jobs and they shouldn't be in care. I always refer to them as Burger King people. They should be working in Burger King between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. with no people contact.
Julie has a third theory.
I do.
That developed when we were working together in membership. So we were talking about how we change the culture in an organisation. There are a third that get it. There are a third that do it because of their compliance. There's a third that get rid of.
Well, the middle third are people who want help to get it.
Yeah.
Julie would agree with the numbers. Yeah. We get 70-80% people complying.
I can't do maths.
No, it's fine. It is about right. And it is about right. But we've got to stop not being honest when we have problems like this.
Get them out.
And I think, well, and some people do need a bit of change. Sometimes people have never been spoken to in their life. I remember my very first job as a young psychologist before I went to you, Bob, and this guy told me that he was probably the best person on the planet at managing behaviours. He was in a day service in Kidderminster, and then I talked to his staff. Who's the best person managing behaviours here? And they all went, not George, he's a nightmare. He's a control freak. At the end of it, I thought, ethically, I need to say something. It didn't go well. You arrogant, jumped up little shit is what he said. Yeah. So we'll get on to the discussion. I've overrun again. The key is the headings. You get all these slides. It's all about stress and stress management. My stress affects your stress, emotional contagion. Yours affects mine. The environment affects all of us. So actually, there's lots of ways that we can help with stress. But the key one is to get people feeling safe, confident, and empathic towards people. I need to understand that this is not a monster. And we do this by formulation, by persuasion, by brainwashing at times. If you go on our website, you'll see a lot of practitioner articles. One of them is called thematic analysis, and it's a skill that I think people should use more. It's pseudoscience. You get people to say, what do you think causes behaviour? Give me examples, and you pull it all together. And what you end up with is a complicated mess. And then you put it into themes. Now, one of the individuals I worked with last year, we did this in a structured way. The staff were developing empathy. He's in a very good place now, from being threatened to be locked up at St Andrews over here. Not a nice place. But one of the things we did was, I said, record everything he says, but not your usual thing. What he says is important. So each theme we use. Autism diagnosis was number 1. Number 2, doesn't seem to understand it or want it. Quote from him, I hate fucking autism. Each one had a quote. And we used that with his MDT, and after that life was a lot easier. And said, he's complicated, isn't he? The psychiatrist went, did you put these in any order? I lied. Clinical lies, Julie. He said, nope. It seems like there's an order to these things. Mm-mm. Is it? Is it? Oh, forensic, that was number 19. So what we're doing all the time is looking at stress and distress behaviour, but most importantly, we are looking at a whole mishmash of people when they say, I don't understand why someone's behaving this way. And to be empathic, I always tell people, think about a time in your life when you were really, really losing it and not great. Now imagine that's every day. No one's there, and then somebody, this member of staff comes in and you feel comfortable with them, you would cling on to them. What do a lot of institutional staff say? This person's got favourites. No, they just feel more safe with some people in relationships than others. And to me, a lot of this approach is there, but I want to finish this one example, which is a bit of research, because this is highfalutin, makes me look good. We funded a study about staff stress who work with people with behaviours of concern. It's available online, it's free. The key thing was, this study had a range of people who worked in hospital community. I think we had a couple of your staff on it as well, a few others. And my colleague did a thematic analysis, no assumptions. What are the top 5 things? It wasn't wages, wasn't even the environment. One of their biggest stresses, they said, was disagreements with other colleagues about how to manage the person's behaviour. Number 1, and interpersonal issues. Number 1. Lone working was very high, and I think we need to acknowledge that. Although lone working is often safer, because you can relate to people, it's also more frightening for people. So what support do we give people in lone working is the next bit of research. I think he wants us to fund it. I'm not. He's now got a lectureship, he can do it. But characteristics of the person was in there. There's a concept called malignant alienation in therapy, where therapists start to hate their patients. Strong language. You see it in staff teams all the time, where they actually don't like someone. And I've always asked the same question. If you don't like someone, how come you're their key worker? Because often you are. And then your first thing as a controlling key worker is then to fix them. That makes it 10 times worse. It's understanding these relationships that's critical. So low arousal practices, we have lots of stuff around restraint reduction. I didn't want to talk about that today, how you do it. But the philosophy is simple. It's about us, not them. And this I funded because I wanted some practical research that we could use. It happens to turn out, although my name's second on here, that's a very, very fleeting second. Yeah, I read it once. And we're going to carry on doing this proper applied work. The young man, Daniel Whippen here, who's an amazing young man who did this work, he said, I hate the word burnout. So we all do. He said, fancy giving someone a questionnaire that says, how burnt out are you? That's not positive psychology. Now give someone a questionnaire saying, how confident are you to work with this person? Lots of positive messages. But we do the opposite. Burnout is the most useless term that was ever invented in psychology. All our staff are burning out. Well, if you keep saying that, they will. They feel hopeless and hopelessness. And if you say you're burnt out and I'm burnt out too, and my God, we're all burnt out, then they'll all run off. Or we say this person's dangerous. So the approach is a change from like micro skills. Teaching those skills is important, how you stand, how you manage crises. We actually do a lot of simulation training when we train staff, and people get worried about that. It's gone out of fashion. I would rather you experience being shouted and screamed at as a new worker in a controlled environment, even because some of the people we work with now haven't even had that experience, to say this won't happen very often, but we're going to put you under a little bit of a controlled, safe test. So bizarrely for us, when people come on our training, they're a bit surprised. All the philosophy's there, and then they said, it's a bit scary, some of the bits. I remember doing a project in Canada, and they said, we want to see some examples of your work. I said, well, we don't do that. And the man who kept on saying, I said, okay, small group, up you get. And I said, I'm Andy, I'm not very happy, and I ran at him. It's all controlled. He didn't think that. I ripped his shirt off him, all controlled, pretended to bite him, and he was like this. And do you know what he was? He was their lead conflict management trainer. And after that, he kind of lost his job, and now we've got a project with him. Very interesting. And he went, that's traumatising people. I went, it's actually lies to just give people a manual and a video and say that's how you manage behaviours. It's nonsense. So we're doing a lot of this work at the moment around NDTs. We train staff teams. We brainwash them a bit. They don't get a set menu. They get a set menu, not a la carte. They've got to be confident. Some people have it. The other third we can train, and the other third need to go and work in Burger King or any other fast food joint that you want to suggest and recommend. But the approach has evolved, and I'm going to say, like today's wonderful, I am proud of the fact this is not McDonnell Industries. We have a whole team of people all over the world who are connected and do this stuff. I particularly like culturally working in Denmark because I don't have to argue about low arousal. It's almost in the DNA. It's like my holiday place. Whereas I go here or I go to Ireland, it's easier in Ireland now. It would always be, don't agree. Fine, okay, here we go. All right. This is about empathy and compassion and TLC and the basics. I'm afraid some people can reconnect with that, but they need to be trained to do that. They won't just get it by luck. That third group is a lovely example. The people who have it are the people who go on the training courses. They're the people we don't want on training courses.
And the bit that we would want to add to it, and yeah, the half that Mark brings to this relationship in this context is, let's do this in order that somebody can have a life. So, let's do this in order that a person can be in Burger King, or can be in work, or can be in a social situation, wherever that is possible. And it's not, so much of what really distresses me about the behaviour management industry is that it continues to keep people in institutions.
Well, why should they not? It's money.
The whole thing that we're about is, like my daughter, without a bit of help, she couldn't function in the open community. She didn't, so we worked that out.
But you guys did that, and she needed little bits of extra support. She didn't need to be therapised to death.
That's right.
And I think when we're working with traumatised individuals, we have to slow down. Yeah. We have to keep reminding ourselves this is going to take time, and we have to give people an optimistic message, which I will do in Wales, Julie. Yeah. Do you think this has got a chance to success? Not a chance, absolute. Absolute. I'll go and get my rabbit's foot and every other superstitious thing I've got out. But in general, we get a lot of this, right? Because it's about people, and as we all say, relationships. What we do with Mark as well is we give people a route. And although the route is that's the end point, an engaged, self-controlled life that's fulfilling, all these steps along the way, we have to get professionals out of it half the time. Yeah. Right? Because they mean well, but they are well-intentioned idiots. You might want to do it on your next call down in Wales. I dare you. Don't.
They're also, if you look at it from your perspective, from how do we commission a system? They're a cost. And they're a cost that's getting in the way.
They are.
They could be used. You could be using the resource much more effectively.
This is my most embarrassing slide, guys. Look at the list. Yeah. We know how to do this scientifically, but how many does any of that? You do, Martin, but you probably tick all those boxes. The vast majority of people we work with who are stressed have no coping strategies whatsoever, apart from booze, coffee, and frighten each other self to death. And that's the change. I'm going to stop now. On the rest of these slides are lots of practical good examples that I haven't got around to. You can have all of this and we'll give you lots of other information. And actually, I'm going to leave you with that memory strip. There's nothing confidential on there. That's a lot of more current presentations. So I'll leave them with you. Okay. Yeah. And just send them around to everyone. It's fine.
This presentation.
Yeah. Oh, all of it. Yeah.
Andy, you lied. You said that you and Mark were going to talk about.
I know.
Anyway, Mark. The problem is, he just talks over me all the time. But the examples you've got are really they're messy. It's not a neat pathway.
Well, I think that obviously what at Lives what we do is it is simple, but it's not easy. And I think that what happens is when people, or I suppose their needs, or the system sees that their needs increase, unfortunately what we do is we put more and more professionals in, and we exclude more and more friends and family and people around them. And I suppose what we do at Lives is try and look at the ingredients, I suppose, of what someone needs to live a life, and that's bringing some of that back in. And it may well be that those ingredients start off like a Victoria sponge and end up like a brownie, but it kind of is trying to pull it back to the person and what's important to them. And I think that where that sits with what Andy does with the lower arousal is trying to look at not the behaviours, I suppose, is trying to look at what's important to that person and what can try and lower that stress. Because
it's become a bit of a double act.
And it's But
what do you want me to say in this meeting, Mark? Well, do you want angry Andy? Which personality do you need? We need Professor McDonnell. Okay. The last thing here is we work with a lot of families. This sort of training that's online, unfortunately it's in English. We could work on that. But this is open to any people. Although it says it's got a cost, any people in this network connection, if you ring Gemma at our office, she'll give you loads of free places. It's every week. And it's a very basic introduction to the ideas. You'll be welcome. She'll also give you lots of video materials and teaching materials as well. It's absolutely fine. I don't think, this is something we're not precious about. I think more conversations we have like this, the better, really. But thank you very much.